Today on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we are highlighting Hardscape Projects. Consumer horticulture specialist David Hillock finds out how to purchase rock for hardscapes. Former host Steve Owens has tips on building a rock garden, and former host Ray Campbell shows how to create raised beds for easier access gardening. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Oftentimes in the landscape we focus mostly on our plant material, but the hardscaping material in the landscape is just as important and can actually provide a foundation for our landscape designs. One of the common materials that we use is stone. And today we're here at BUCKLEY'S Sticks and Stones with Jennifer Pollard. And Jennifer, thank you for having us. Let's talk a little bit about how we use stone in the landscape and some of the basic things that people should think about before they even begin a project.
Well, it's very important to have a plan.
Okay.
And to measure. A lot of people forget to measure before they come out here. And if they measure, then we can kind of help them decide how much and even what kind of stone they could use.
Very good. So like if they're doing a patio, they need to at least know the square footage of the area they want to cover.
Yeah, the width and the length.
Okay. And if they're doing a retaining wall or a wall, then they need to know linear feet and of course how high they want to build the wall. Okay.
Yes.
Now stone is really unlimited. I mean, there's all kinds of different types of stones. Materials. And most of this that you have is locally or regional stone, isn't it?
Yes, a huge part of it comes out of Oklahoma.
Okay, good. I think that's important that you use stone that's, you know, that's native to the region, so that it adds to the overall design and just the ambiance of the region in which you live in.
Yes.
So working with stone can be really quite simple, and there's a lot of people who can probably just, you know, do it yourselfer projects. There's a lot of stuff online that they can get information from, I suppose. But it's also probably important to involve a professional on occasion, isn't it?
Yes, if you're doing a retaining wall over 3 feet, or sometimes just a project that might be a little bit too big for you, you should talk to a landscaper. See if they can help you with the design or even do the job for you. Okay, so especially in retaining walls over 3 feet, really an engineer or engineering stuff comes into play there, and they need to involve someone who's really qualified to build something like that, right? Yes, you want it done right so you don't have to do it again.
Good. Now some stone I imagine is probably easier to work with too. So like if it's a square stone or flat stone, you know, that's probably easy to work with in some cases, especially in walls, but if it's irregular or round stones, then it becomes more complicated, doesn't it?
Yes, we have some stones that are chopped, cut into nice squares or rectangles, which makes it much easier for you just to stack them up. And then we have other ones that are more natural, that take a little bit more, it's kind of like a big puzzle to put them together.
Puzzle, yeah. And that takes more time to put together, usually if you're building a wall like that.
Yes.
And there's also drywall stacking as well as mortar walls. So if, you know, again, that can be complicated, and you might just have someone, if you're experienced in doing either one of those, and that might not be too bad, but again, you might have to think about providing or hiring a professional to help you with it.
Yes, it's always good to get a professional's opinion if you're just not sure. A lot of times landscapers will draw up plans for you and sell those to you, but you can do all the work yourself, and they'll outline what kind of rock, what kind of plants, and kind of just give you the guidelines you need to do the job correctly.
Good. We've talked a little bit about patios and walls, which is a common use of the stone, but you have lots of stone on your property here that you sell. It can be used for all kinds of things. Rock gardens, it's great for, you know, or just using in the landscape as, you know, again, providing some contrast or some interest in the gardens. You have some rocks that are used for water features.
Yes.
And I've noticed you even have one great big beautiful flat stone that you have engraved your name on it, so people can use that as maybe a marker for their home by engraving their name on it.
Yes, we have a lot of people get them for their address numbers.
Okay.
Or even their last name on them. We have a gentleman that will do just about anything on them.
Good.
You can just pick out the stone and he'll put whatever you want on it.
All right, very good. Now, when buying stone for the projects, they come in a wide variety of material. How do you figure the cost, or how do you help someone determine how much they need for that?
Depending on their square footage, we can figure out if they need a pallet or less than a pallet. We sell it by the weight, and we will break pallets, but you do get a better deal. You get more for your money when you do buy it by the pallet, but you don't have to. Okay, and so obviously there are different thicknesses of stone as well. So, you've got like 2-inch down to inch, half an inch, etc. So the thinner, the thicker the material, the more sturdier it is, correct? Mm-hmm. So if they're using it for a space that has a lot of foot traffic, or they're using, having heavy furniture or whatever on it, then they want something a little bit thicker than the thinner stuff. Yeah, your 1.5 inch is good for light foot traffic walkways, but the thicker, the 2-inch, 2.5 inch is great if you're going to have big heavy grills or heavy patio furniture on them. They'll hold up a lot better. And
okay, all right. So about how, looking at this pallet here, we've got, it looks like it's about 3 foot by 3 foot. So how much, how do you figure out how much is on a pallet?
We figure about 10 square feet a layer. Okay. And we just count the layers. And that gives us the best estimate on how much this pallet is going to cover. Okay, excellent. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for having us. It's been fun, and we've learned a lot about using stone in the landscape today. Yes, thanks for coming out.
19 years ago, when I was working here as studio garden manager, I had the great opportunity to construct the rock garden. It was a lot of fun back in those days putting this together, and it's a lot of fun now to come out and see how things are doing. Of course, rock gardening got its start in England back in the 18th century. The naturalistic style of garden design was becoming popular. Gardeners would be inspired by what they saw out in nature. They would try to recreate little wildflower meadows, or maybe bubbling streams or water gardens, things like that. The more adventurous gardeners were those that had probably been hiking up in the Swiss Alps or some of the other rocky areas, and they wanted to create that rocky type of scenery in their own gardens. So they did this, and now all of our rock gardens today are the descendants of those first English mountaintop gardens. Well, I had so much fun putting this together all those years ago that I knew that when I had my own place, my own property, I would want to do my very own rock garden. And recently, I've had time to start working on that, and I'd like to show it to you. Here in the display gardens on my own property, I really like using rock. You can see I've used a lot of native sandstone to build the raised beds. And raised beds are awesome because it gives you the opportunity to create your own soil, and the plants do so much better. But I also really like the look you get with the plants and the rock together. Well, in the rock garden that I wanted to create, I was very fortunate in that there was some sandstone rock on the property. I was able to get in there, clear out some vegetation, rent some equipment, and go in there and collect the rock for my rock garden. Now, the rock garden at the Oklahoma Gardening Studio Garden is based on sort of a prairie rock outcrop, something that maybe you would see in the prairies out here in central or western Oklahoma. Some rock, some empty space for plants, and a little bit more rock and that kind of thing. When I set about to build my rock garden, I wanted to use a lot more rock. And also, the rock garden at Oklahoma Gardening is built on a slope. It's a beautiful setting. We were able to just kind of dig into the slope and place the boulders. Well, here I have no slope, so I brought in several loads of soil and I built up a mound, or sort of built my own mountain. And coupling that with using a lot of rock, I feel like I've really been able to build my own little mountaintop garden. Now, when you're constructing a rock garden, I think it's a good idea to use the biggest rock that you can manage. Rent the equipment, move the really large rocks into place, because it'll be more impressive. I think it'll look a little more realistic. And another really good thing is that you can use more types of plants. If you use really small rocks, you have to go really tiny with the plant material. Otherwise, the plants are going to grow up too large and they're going to cover up all the rock that you've worked so hard to get into place. Well, in moving our rocks, I rented a skid steer loader, one that could lift about 3,000 pounds, and a couple of these boulders that we put in place are pushing about 3,000 pounds. And when we put these in place, we made sure that we got these two side by side. If you look close, you can kind of see the channel between these rocks. This is the way they were sitting out in the wild. This was once one large boulder, and you can tell over time it kind of broke apart, and now it's two rocks. So we wanted to make sure we utilized both of those rocks where we could put them together like we did here. And we did want this garden to look somewhat natural, or at least an idealized natural sort of creation. So some of the rocks, we took photos, we made notes of the arrangement and just the way they were sitting out in the wild, and we brought those as a group and put those in the garden here, the exact arrangement that they were out in nature. Another thing you can do to make sure your rock garden looks natural is to be careful when you're moving the rocks. Not only to keep yourself safe and not harm your body, but also keep the rocks from getting scratched up and banged up. You don't want to use a front end loader to load them up and bang them around, because we don't want to scratch up the surface. We want to keep them looking natural. Any scratches or marks or dings or breaks in the rock will change the color, and it won't look consistent, and it won't look quite as natural. So try not to scratch or scrape up your rock. I knew when I built the rock garden that I wanted to have a pathway going through it. A pathway, I think, is great because it lets you get up close and personal to some of the small plants and just experience the garden in a different way. And also having a pathway through a rock garden, it just in and of itself, it helps create little pockets for plants where the stepping stones or the changes in elevation of these rocks next to some of the big boulders just gives you these nice little pockets for planting plants in those little nooks and crannies. Now, when we put the pathway in place, we borrowed a technique that the Japanese garden design utilizes, and that is to place the stepping stones where their longest axis runs perpendicular to the pathway. For example, I've got two rectangular pieces of paper here, and the stones are laid out in this fashion, where this would be the line of the pathway with the longest axis running perpendicular to the path. The opposite of that would be to align the stepping stones like this. And in a pathway this way, it kind of gives you the idea that you should speed up and walk fast through the garden, whereas if they're arranged in this fashion, it imparts the idea of walking slow through the garden and enjoying the garden a little bit more. Well, this garden is more about the rocks than it is about the plants. I want to make sure that any plant I put in here is not going to get too large. I've done a lot of work putting the rocks in place, and I don't want all of that to be covered up by the larger plants. Now, over the years, I will research different plants and try out new small perennials. I'll put in some small shrubs, maybe a few conifers and some bulbs to see what's going to work well in this garden. But in the meantime, I've kind of filled it up with a few annuals. We got some of the little dwarf Serenita angelonias. We've got some fanflower or scaevola, some zinnias, and a few other things. One of my favorite little annuals for the rock garden is this little yellow daisy right down here. This is the Dahlberg daisy. I love its bright yellow flowers and very delicate foliage. But these are annuals, and these will reseed themselves. We'll see them popping up in different places, and I just love the look they give you in the rock garden. Well, thank you so much for letting me show you my new rock garden. I hope in the future I have the opportunity to let you take a look at it again when we have a few more plants.
You know, shortly after I retired in the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture at Oklahoma State University, I became very interested in one part of horticulture referred to as horticulture therapy. Actually, I had studied a little bit about horticulture therapy earlier in my career, but as I was getting a little bit older and some of my physical capabilities were becoming limited, I knew that at some point in time I may have to employ some of the horticulture therapy techniques for myself. So I enrolled in the horticulture therapy course at Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City, under Julia Laughlin, one of my former students, which was very interesting. And we learned a lot about the things that we can do to continue to increase and allow people to continue to garden and enjoy the aspects of horticulture even though they have physical limitations. And as I'm beginning to age and have had some problems with knees and with hips and bones like many of us do, I found out that getting up and down from the garden has been a very difficult thing to do. And so I decided this year, because my raised beds were already beginning to go down and break down and need to be renovated, that I would build some raised beds that were elevated more so that I could actually sit on the side and garden that way. And it's been very, very effective for me. So what we started with was simply a 4x4, very similar to this. It was a treated 4x4 that was sunk about 9 inches into the ground. And then we positioned on that 4x4 1x12, actually 1x8s, but when they're playing down, they're only about 1x7, 2 of those high to give us a little bit of height. Now what Marty did when he built these, he actually put the sides together in his shop so that he had the sides, the 2 1x8s screwed in or fastened on to the leg. He had a seat, a similar seat put on the side here so I could sit on it and braced underneath. And we simply came in, dug the hole, put the 2 sides down, leveled them good, and then he used some screws and screwed in the ends to the 2 legs on each side. And it made a very, very good bed for us to actually go ahead and fill up with soil. Now I've got quite a bit of depth in here. And you know, topsoil can kind of be expensive if you get really good topsoil. So I decided what I would do is I would use some cheaper topsoil on the bottom. And so I've got it filled up to about maybe half or a little bit more than half with a rather inexpensive topsoil that is got some good drainage to it, some sandy loam, but I wanted some better soil on the top. So I was able to get from Prairie's Edge Landscape here in Stillwater, I was able to get screened compost, which, you know, I thought you can't beat that. So I went ahead and filled the top up with screened compost. And you can see here the difference in the soil here where the less expensive topsoil, sandy loam is on the bottom, and then the good screened topsoil is on the top like here. And so when we got that fixed, and I went ahead and just filled this on in with my screened topsoil or my screened compost, I really had an excellent bed here to grow things in without too many more soil amendments. And so I'm really anxious this year to see how this is going to come out and perform for me. And I've already begun to plant in these raised beds, and they worked out great for me. I really like them because of the height. After we had put the 2 sides on of the 1x8s, we had secured the seat on the side and then had filled in around the edges of it. I have a height here of about 14 inches, which is just about perfect for me to be able to sit down and get up without a lot of problems. And the beds are 4 feet wide, so I can reach from one side to the middle of the bed, then I can walk over on the other side and reach into the middle from the other side. And you know, we can grow just about anything in a raised bed. We can grow in a ground bed. One of the things we have to consider is because they are raised, they're going to dry out much quicker, so more attention has to be paid to watering and to irrigation. And I'll probably come in later and put in some sort of a drip or a irrigation system on these that will help me to maintain a more even water supply. But like I say, you know, you can grow about anything in these raised beds. Over here in this raised bed, and this one is 4 by 8 feet, so that's about, what, 32 feet. I have dedicated it to strawberries. Now someone said, you know, that's tying up a bed for an entire year. In fact, for several years with just strawberries. Why are you doing that? Well, I'm doing that for 2 reasons, maybe 3. I've got plenty of raised beds to grow what I want to grow, plus still some ground beds. And I like strawberries. I mean, that's the simple thing. You grow what you like, you grow what you want. And with strawberries, there's not many other fruits or many other vegetables for that matter any closer to the ground that you have to bend over or get on your knees and pick than strawberries. Maybe potatoes since they're under the ground. But you know, strawberries are really what we used to call a stoop crop. They definitely are. And so that's why I dedicated this bed just to strawberries. This year, because they're new, I can come in and interplant in the center. I'll probably come in a little bit later this spring and I may plant, you know, I could go ahead and plant some early spring vegetables in here even now. I may could even plant some later things. In fact, I'm even thinking about maybe planting a couple of squash plants in here. They'll give a little bit of shade to the strawberries as they grow. So, you know, you can grow about anything in these raised beds. I'm really proud of the ones that I've got. And then over here on the other side, I've got a different type of raised bed, and we're going to do some planting in it. It was less expensive than these, simply because it was made out of less expensive material, but still just as functional. And it's made simply out of landscape timbers. This particular raised bed was already existing, like my others were, and they were all made from landscape timber, except the others with the landscape timber had already beginning to deteriorate, but this was still in really good shape, and so I really didn't want to destroy it. So all I did was build up on the existing bed that I had, which of course was much too low for me, and I built this on up with a couple of more landscape timbers and made a very functional bed once again, where I can just simply sit here on the edge of the bed and do my planting from the side. I've already planted my broccoli and cabbage, green cabbage up to this point, but also wanted some red cabbage, and so that's simply what I'll do right now. I'll go ahead and I'm putting my cabbage actually about 12 inches apart, which is a little bit close spacing for cabbage if you want big heads, but I want smaller heads, and if you bring those together in a smaller spacing, you're going to have a little bit smaller head simply because of the competition. So we can go ahead and I'll finish planting these out. When I get through on this side, I'll just walk over to the other side and plant from that row as well, because you see I can easily reach to the center, and then I can walk over and reach to the other side if I wish to do that. But all I have to do is just kind of scoot up the bed like this without ever having to get up or get down. And so it's working out very, very well for me. Another thing, as I mentioned in some of our other earlier beds that we talked about, is that we can do some intercropping or some interspacing on these. And so that's what I've done here. I've just planted my cabbage, then I've gone ahead and interspaced or interplanted with onions. And it's working out very well, because about the time that I want to add nitrogen to these cabbage to kind of promote their growth, then would probably be about the same time I'd also want to add nitrogen to my onions to promote bulb growth on those as well. If you're having some trouble, some sort of limitations physically in the garden, I would encourage you to look around and check out on the website. There's many, many websites that you can go on out there and find some tips, some helps, and some aids for gardening for those people who have some sort of limited capabilities or physical limitations. So I would really encourage you to do that, and I'm kind of excited about the way mine's going to turn out this year. As you can see on this particular raised bed, I've put my hoops over it because it's very easy then, after I've got my hoops installed there, to maybe put a row cover over that should I have some sort of a tender crop in here or something that I want to protect either from a late frost, an early frost in the fall, or even maybe from the extreme heat in the summertime. What I have done before, I've used my hoops like this in the garden as well to prevent some insect damage, and that's probably what I'll do with these. I'll probably cover these cabbage and broccoli over with a light shade cloth or a light cloth later on, actually just to help reduce the damage from the cabbage moth or the cabbage looper. So, you know, it's been very functional for me, and I would encourage you, as I said, to look and see and try to do some different things in your garden. I mean, you know, we need to renovate our garden occasionally. If we're going to renovate our garden, let's renovate it to where it can be the most functional for us.
Next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we are getting childish with youth gardening. We travel to Ponca City YMCA to visit a youth gardening program. Then in Muskogee, Oklahoma, we stop by a daycare that uses gardening as part of its curriculum. Former host Brenda Sanders creates a planter out of a toy dump truck, and Assistant Extension Specialist Shelly Mitchell has a gnome garden project. Join us then for more of the best TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.